Hi, I'm Susan. Welcome to my home and studio at Windy Acre Cottage. It's a 100-year-old craftsman cottage where I love to paint and garden and entertain and care for all my wonderful fur babies, both those that are adopted and all the little fosters. It's also my home base for many fun adventures of the art, history, and gardening kind. Please take a moment and follow me on Instagram at SusanElizabethJones_art. Hey, and welcome back. I'm Susan, and we are here with Brilliant Strokes in the last class of this series, learning how to paint in 5 steps with a special emphasis on the underpainting. Now, we have done the burnt sienna underpainting in week 1. We did the burnt sienna underpainting with the value study in week 2. In week 3, we plumped up our underpainting a little bit by either making it cooler or warmer, depending on what shape we were in. And then last week, we did the complement underpainting to whatever shape we were in. So if we had something that was red, it would have a green underpainting. If it was blue, it would have an orange underpainting. But today, we're just going wild and we're doing an outrageous underpainting in a brilliant Cad Red medium. And it doesn't have to be Cad Red medium. You can pick any color you want, because if we let little pieces and parts of this show through, it's gonna add the color harmony. It's gonna neutralize whatever colors we put on top of it. And it's going to cover that white canvas so that you don't have little white spots showing through. So I don't do this very often, and when I do, I rarely use red. There is an artist down in, I think she's in Alabama, named Melanie Morris, and she uses the red underpainting and just makes beautiful, beautiful paintings. I've done it before with a dark plum, and I love how that turns out too. So if you could just do whatever favorite color you have, or something that's gonna complement the painting you're gonna put on top of it, you wanna go ahead and paint your canvas, and it has to dry completely. I actually painted this underpainting 2 or 3 weeks ago because I wanted it to be completely dry before I painted on top of it. So today it is completely dry, so we can go straight into painting our painting. And our reference photo are these spools of thread right here. Now, I've already taken my reference photo and fold it in half one direction, open it up, fold it in half the other direction, open it up, and you can see the crease makes crosshairs on your reference photo. So those crosshairs we're going to paint on here. And I'm just going to kind of mark the halfway point, tick marks. And when you fold it, you can see that midline is about at the edge of the tops of the spools. So if that is your mid mark, that's about right here for that spool of thread. So we will go ahead and draw that in. We've got another one over here. Actually, I need to make that a little bit bigger. one more that kind of goes off over to one side. And this one actually is a little bit further down. I even make it come up a little bit. It's a little bit bigger than the others. Okay, that may not be perfect, but we are going to go with this as our underpainting. There is a cast shadow back there. There's a cast shadow back there. And a little bit on here. And we will leave that there. I'm going to clean my brush. Dry it off in a bit. And decide how I'm going to paint that background. So it looks like to me that the background is actually the table, but the table goes so far back that you actually see the table in front of the thread and you see the table behind the thread. And we could continue to do our painting that way. If we did, we would have the same color for both, only it would get yellower as it came forward and it would get bluer as it went back. Because when you have perspective, that happens. Not necessarily in that small amount of space, but there are ways that we can manipulate that color to give that depth perception. But what I think will probably be easier is to have like a wall behind it. And even though it's not in our reference photo, I can easily paint that in, because if there is a plane change, different 90 degrees to where they're sitting, the plane they're sitting on is going to be your ground plane, and the wall behind them would be the upright. And there's a huge difference in how that value is going to hit. So we're going to paint the upright probably darker than we would the ground plane. So let's mix up a color. And I'm going to mix up kind of a light brown. And light brown is basically red, yellow, and blue with more yellow and red. And we need to put in white and yellow to lighten it up and warm it up. And that looks too blue, so we're going to add more red, more yellow, a little more red, more white, anything that's not blue, because it already has a little too much blue in there. Getting a lot closer, it needs a little bit more red. Went a little too far, gonna add some yellow. I'm holding my brush like it's a baton, and I'm just going to lay in a few brush strokes down here in the foreground. And maybe even a little bit back here to show the back of the table that it's sitting on. There we go. And what color should we put back there as the wall color? I'm thinking just for fun. If we don't like it, we can always paint over it. That's the beauty of acrylic paint. when it's water soluble while it's wet, but once it's completely dried, it's waterproof. It turns into kind of a plastic, and that's why it's really good to, you know, paint outdoor stuff in acrylic. It'll be waterproof. I'm going to use a little phthalo turquoise and a little white. Maybe a little red in there too, kind of make it a purpley color. I don't want to put too much red in there because I don't want it going too gray on me. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. And we'll go ahead and lay that color in. And I'm not going to put it on too thick because I do want some of that red to show through. Call that leaving air between the strokes. We want our brush strokes to go in every direction. All your brush strokes are going up and down, it's going to look like it's raining. If they're all going side to side, it's going to look like reflection on water. If you don't mix enough paint, we can always remix it. It may not be exactly the same color, but that's okay. If it's not the same color, then you want to move some of that color around. Oops, somehow I just went right through my color from down there. From the ground plane. So we're just going to go over that some. And add just a little bit of gradation, that little subtle change in color. Because light is required to actually have color, and light doesn't fall on an object equally. So even in an object that's the same color, because the light's not the same, it's going to look a little bit different depending on what you're looking at. Okay, let's clean our brush. I need a little more white paint. And if you didn't buy a large tube of white, go get a large tube of white and a large tube of yellow. We tend to go through more yellow and white paint than any other color, but they are our lightest colors. So that's why we go through them more often. All right. Now, let's see what we got going on here. So we've got our spools already blocked in. We've got our ground plane that they're sitting on. We've got our upright behind them. So now it's time to paint in our thread. And if you'll notice, the thread appears to be changing color, but what's happening is it's either in shadow, or it's the mid-tone, or it's the highlight, or it's the reflection. So the green, you can really see the shadow, the highlight, the mid-tone, and the reflection just straight across. The pink has a little bit of the reflection. We don't see it in the yellow so much, just the shadow and the highlight. And over here we see on the right side, we've got a little bit of the highlight, the mid-tone, and a little bit of the shadow going on. So for every color we put in for our thread, we're going to need 3 different values of that same color, possibly even 4, depending on if the reflection's a different value than one of the other colors. So I'm going to start with pink, and I'm just going to take some red and some white and mix it together. Maybe just a little yellow in there, not much. Now my red happens to be Cad Red Medium. That pink looks like it can possibly be reached with this color. We're studying reds in Creative Spirits this month because depending on what color pink you want really determines which color red you choose to begin with. So if you need a hot pink, you cannot mix a hot pink. You've got to start with either a magenta or rose and then work from there. And even depending on your pastel pink, it'll be determining what kind of red you start with. So this may not be exactly right, only because I'm just using one particular red right now, but we could match this exactly if we wanted to. So I'm going to take that and divide it in half and add just a little bit of this phthalo turquoise to it to make it darker and make it cooler. I need a little more red. And it just doesn't take much to bend that color. I've gone way too far on the blue side. So I can use some of that, but I'm gonna have to use it to temper my pink. I have the same trouble explaining to my students how much of another color to use to bend that color or temper it in the direction you want it to go. And sometimes it just takes the amount of paint that will fit on the head of a pen to get your color where you want it to be. There we go. So if we start here, it may not be dark enough. As it comes around in front, it gets a little pinker. And as it makes that turn, it's going to be in light, in highlight. So I'm going to have to add a little more white, maybe a little more white and yellow, to get it to go into highlight as it turns. And I can use a really light pressure to kind of blend those two colors together. And And then our shadow over here. There we go. So we have a shadow color, we have a highlight, we have our local color or our mid-tone, and then we go back into shadow over here, and actually we go darker over here. So we've got that first spool there, and while it's still wet, I want to work on that highlight a little more. We could come back and do more detail later, but it'll be dry, and I'd rather do this while the paint is still wet. I'm adding a little white and a little yellow, so it's lighter and warmer. Clean my brush, so I'm using a clean brush and try to blend that in a little bit. Okay, clean that brush. And we can do the same thing over here. It looks like it's probably a little bit darker pink. So since we're already working with these colors, I'll go ahead and mix up a little bit more, but just a little bit darker pink. A lighter, warmer color here on the right. So we'll add a little white and yellow. And then a darker pink with a little bit of blue in it for our shadow. It also looks like there might be a little bit of shadow underneath that top edge of the spool. So we'll put a little bit of a cast shadow there. Alrighty, clean that brush. And we'll move to the next one. Now this looks more like a mint green to me. So I'm gonna start with a little phthalo, a little white, and maybe a little yellow. And I went too far on the yellow, so I'm gonna go back and do some more of the phthalo turquoise. Maybe add a little blue to it. In the shadow. There's shadow over here. add a little phthalo turquoise and white. Maybe a little yellow, but not much. We don't want to turn it into a lime. We just want it lighter and a little warmer. And pop that highlight in there. Okay, we need more mid-tone now because I've gone over it too much. That edge looks a little too sharp, so I'm going to soften it up a bit. Now just for the demonstration, I'm really simplifying those shapes. You may be seeing where the thread is wound more tightly or more loosely, causing additional detail on here, and we can always add that at the end, but not at this point. We got to get those basic colors in there. So let's move to our next one, and it's a yellow. So I'm going to take some white and mix it with my yellow. Mix a little green in there just to maybe, let's just do a little brown. That's a good one. So that'll be our yellow in shadow. Will be that brown from down here. Clean the brush. We'll put that beautiful yellow on top. And now I'm going to mix my highlight. So that's going to be more white in that yellow. And it goes about right here. Very soft pressure. We'll blend that out. Now you're going to have your most chroma, that's your most intense color, on either side of that highlight before it goes into shadow. So we could even put a little bit of chroma in there if we wanted to. I'm going to clean my brush so that I have a clean brush. And I'm going to kind of lightly blend some of those colors. Okay. We can always darken a dark, lighten a light. reshape a shape, anything we might need, but that is in step number 4. And right now we're in step number 3. Step number 1 was the underpainting. We chose a brilliant, wild underpainting, so we chose the Cad Red medium underpainting. That was step number 1. Step number 2, we blocked in the basic shapes, and I just mixed up a neutral color to contrast with the underpainting so we could actually see our shape. Step number 3 was to start scrubbing in our basic colors, and we're doing that, but we're leaving some air between the strokes, so a little bit of that red is showing through, and we're still in that stage because we still haven't covered all of our red yet. So now we need to start talking about our spools. So one thing I didn't do is these spools have the little holes in them to make them spool. We'll add that right now. That's a shape I want to get in there, or not. You can put that in as a detail, but I want to go ahead and kind of lay out where that's going to be. Okay, so our spool has different planes. The top of the spool is a different plane than the side of the spool, and so it's going to change color, but then as that spool goes away from the light, it's also going to get darker. So I'm going to start with this same color. Well, actually, let me make it a little darker. That's too dark. I'm gonna use that one on the side. So I made a little bit darker, kind of a wood color to put down here as the bottom of that spool.
And the top of the spool.
Okay, and then I'm going to mix a little white for the top of the spool. Okay, I'm going to take that darker color. If I have to mix more, all it is red, yellow, and blue with a little extra blue in there to go darker and cooler. If it's too purple, you want to add a little more yellow. And because the light's coming from the right, it's going to be shadowy on the right. move to a smaller brush to do that. When you're using a brush, I usually use the same brush for the whole painting because it's that wide this way, but this way it is paper thin. And if I need a dot, I can just use that corner. So depending on how you use your brush will help you put in those strokes that you want. But if you want to switch to a smaller brush, this is another flat. This one's a number, I think this is a number 2 and that's a number 6. But they're not consistent between brands, what size they are, so that really is irrelevant. 2s are smaller than 6s normally, but let's see what we can do here. We're gonna add some yellow and white to that base color and get it lighter and warmer because that light is hitting in here more directly. It's also hitting the top of the spool down here more directly. Even have a highlight in here. And I think I've gotten those sides too dark, so I'm going to go with a little bit lighter color. Lighten up those sides of the spool. Everything's covered, so we're moving into step number 4, which is the magic stage. This is where we're going to reshape shapes, add highlights, add accents. One thing I want to do is have a good cast shadow back here. We're going to paint those in. I've just got underpainting back there right now. And I'm also going to put in that occlusion shadow. The color of the spool is not much different than the color of the table it's sitting on, but anytime you have an object that's sitting on another object, it's going to have this tiny little dark line under it. And next time you're looking at an object sitting on a table in light, look and see if you can find that occlusion shadow. It's going to be just right down there. And that will anchor it to the table. If you don't have that shadow, it's going to look like your objects are floating over the objects that they're sitting on. And while I've got a little dark on my brush, I'm going to throw in some cast shadow color on the bottom rim here. Because again, remember the light can't hit that directly everywhere. Now at this point, I'm going to back up and look at my painting and decide what needs to be edited. One is, I don't think I have that lined up the way I want to have it lined up. So I'm going to throw in a little cast shadow down here to even that up just a smidge. Okay. There might be a little bit of a shadow going on over here. And we could clean up some edges if we wanted to, or we can move to step number 4, which is more detail. So, what detail might we put in there? Well, let me look at our photo. If we wanted to, we could put some sort of impression of the paper that's on top of the spool. It's quite possible I got the holes of the spool too big. And if I wanted to, I could come back and either reshape those or make them smaller. You might notice I'm choking up on my brush a little bit more when I'm working with a smaller brush and a little bit more detail. If I wanted to, I could draw a piece of thread that's coming out here to the table. But if I do that, it's going to cast a shadow. So I've got to go back and grab a shadow color. And follow the shadow onto the table. If I wanted to, I could have a piece of thread pulling over this way. And again, it's going to have a little bit of a casting a shadow. And I think I put that cast shadow on the wrong side. The shadow has to be to the opposite side of the light. So I'm going to actually go in with my thread color and go over that. If I wanted to, I could put a little bit of a shadow where there's some divots in the thread. I could even have a highlight on the thread if I wanted one. Where it bends, it might catch a little light. Maybe soften that a little bit. Could we have some corners that catch some light? Definitely, we could. We want to grab a corner. Where it changes planes. Maybe not in the shadow, but over here in the light. Okay, so at this point I have gone through my 5 step by 4 steps, but we still have 1 step to go. And by now you already know that that last step is to simply sign your name. But I'm not going to do that, because what I want to do is I want to live with this painting for at least 24 hours. So I want to leave it alone. I want to go do other things. I want to wake up the next day with fresh eyes and look at it like I've never seen it before. And at this point, I'm going to go, it's perfect, I love it, sign my name. Or not. It's quite possible I would go, oh my gosh, this dried and it went too dark, so I need to change that value. Or, oh my goodness, I completely left out something I didn't see. After you're staring into your reference photo and staring into your painting, your mind will play tricks on you. You think you see stuff that's there that's not there, and just the opposite. You don't see things that need to be added, but you'll only know that with fresh eyes. Now, years ago, before we had cell phones, we used to keep compact mirrors in the studio, and you would back up and look in that mirror over your shoulder at your painting. So you're looking into the mirror, and somehow that degree of separation gave you fresh eyes. It looked like a painting you had never seen before. It's really odd how that works. But now, because we have got cell phones, and I usually keep mine in my pocket, but it's in the other room, I can grab my cell phone, take a photo of my painting, turn around and look at my photo, and I'm going to get that same results as if I have fresh eyes. I'm going to be able to see what needs to be changed while I've still got all my paint out. So that's what I want you to try. Try painting a painting and then put it away, go to bed, next morning, fresh eyes, look at it. And it's either not going to look near as bad as you think it's going to, or it's going to have a flaw that's going to jump out at you just completely obvious. The next time you paint a painting, take a photo of it with your phone and then look at the photo it's gonna look so much different in that photo than it does in real life, and it's the same painting. I'm not gonna ask you to grab a compact mirror because we just really don't do that anymore, but if you've got one handy, you might try it and see how that works. But I want you to keep painting. Practice makes perfect. I know it's a cliche, but it is true. The way you learn your unique style, the way you develop your skills is practice, practice, practice. And I hope you enjoyed these videos, and I hope you have come in touch with your creative side and keep it up. We'll see you later.